All right, so we're going to talk about the Phase 3 assignment in Project 3. This is the modularity and pattern portion, where essentially what you're going to be doing is taking the mark that you made and deconstructing it so that you can create a pattern out of it. So this phase explores pattern making using that brand mark, right, as the foundation for recognition, consistency, and the visual graphic interest. But just be aware that there's going to be special focus that's paid to grid systems, modularity, the Gestalt principle that you should have read about in your book, rhythm, and concept implementation. All right, so let's look at the instructions. All right, so the first part is going to be creating the pattern. So you're going to copy your unaltered or your emblematized mark into a new Illustrator file, or you could, try to use both, whichever. But you're going to begin exploring what happens when you deconstruct parts of your graphic mark. And you start to arrange the artwork to create an evenly repeating and modular pattern. Now, you must deconstruct your mark. You can't just take your mark and then just repeat it a whole bunch of times. That is something you're not allowed to do. You actually have to base it on your mark, but in a way that the mark is somewhat changed as part of the patterning. All right, so you can use the deconstruction along with the regular mark to create the pattern, but you still need to be able to understand the brand or the original idea behind the mark. You should be able to understand that whenever you look at the pattern, all right? So that system, that patterning system, should still have a visual alignment with the mark, even though the pattern was created from sort of deconstructed version of it. And the pattern needs to be even enough that it could be turned into a swatch and used to fill on an object. I'm not going to require that you do that, but it should be even enough. And you want to focus on continuity of meaning, rhythm, and balance, right? Don't add any color at all or any tone to this pattern for the study, right? The color and tonality, that's going to come later in another phase, right? So let's take a look at a case study really quick. Okay, so you've seen these marks before. So the one on the left is that original abstract mark for the concept of protection, and so the one on the top here is the unemblematized one, and the one on the bottom is the emblematized one. And so what you see here is something that looks very, very similar. Like you'll see maybe in this top left corner, you see that it starts with that mark, and it kind of goes diagonally repeated, all right, and then that line would be repeated once over. But then, the interim pieces would be the mark flipped, right, and the square that is on the inside is now missing, and then you'll notice that in between these, right, there's this small square, and then there's a slightly larger square in between here, a smaller square again, a slightly larger square, and so on. And it creates this really interesting rhythm and pattern. And this is the kind of thing that you might see like printed on the inside of a folder, for instance, or that would be on the inside of an envelope, for really nice stationery, that kind of thing, right? Like if you wanted to create a pattern that was actually even, something that you would put into other forms of print, like print on fabric, or, something that would be a background pattern, for like something at a trade show or something like that. So anyway, the idea is that you would want to create a pattern that is deconstructed, or that is based on a deconstructed version of the mark. Okay, on the right you'll see we have the original mark, that sort of umbrella shape with the rain or the beads or whatever you want to consider it coming down. And if you remember, that one originally was for protection. And then this is the ensuing pattern that's beside it. And again, you'll see that mark sort of in different ways. You'll see that it's repeated, and it's got this undulating kind of uh, chain going down, but you'll notice if you look closely, there's some parts of the mark that are like missing the interior segment, and then other parts have it, and it's not even the whole circle. Like if you look at the mark, you'll see that that's a whole circle, but it was like the circle was moved down and cut in half, right? You can see that right there. And also you can see that it's the short chain of beads that's used on top of these as opposed to the long chain of beads. So there were parts that were pulled out of the emblem, even though it's the reversal knockout, right? So you can see how that this different pieces and parts of both of these marks were used to create this pattern, right? So that's just an idea. It's not prescriptive, but it's an idea of what you can look at and think about. Okay, and then just below that here is this student example work. Let's take a look at that too. Okay, so let's take a look here. All right, so this is one student's example. This one's, as a reminder, came from Science and Exploration. And so on the bottom are the examples of her regular mark and her emblematized mark. And then this is the ensuing pattern that she created, okay? And then this one, you've got the mark and the emblematized mark, and then you can see the ensuing pattern that was created. And again, all right, this is another example. And once again, now these, it's interesting, this actually, this one is problematic in that this ended up being just a repetition. And I want to use this as a way of pointing this out. So this mark that's on the left, right down here, the black positive shape, it basically was just repeated and flipped to create this, and it actually creates this really interesting white shape in between that looks, ends up looking like a sort of a positive shape. But anyway, she didn't modify the mark at all, and so that was sort of problematic. And also, one of the things that happened is that this flat line right here, on the top of the mark, it kind of like is an abrupt change with the way that this really beautiful scoop happens, right? And so one of the things that I ended up suggesting is that to sort of continue this curved line right here, to kind of dip down and cut some of this mark out so that it continues to be like this undulating line that makes the motion better. And even though you're not going to see that here, you will see it whenever you look at example student work for the next phase where we have color, because she turned this in and then she did go back and she updated it to make it better. So I just want to point that out, that as you're working on this, you can go back and submit your work after you've made it better for an improved grade, and also just to make it better for the next phase of the process, right? Okay, here's another example. And at a glance, it starts to, oops, I didn't mean to do that. At a glance, this starts to look like it's unaltered, but it is altered. And so this is a repetition of the mark. All right, and then this one, you can see how it is changed. And that one, oops, this student actually did something that they weren't supposed to do. They used grayscale here. And so I told you that you're not supposed to use different tones. You're just supposed to use black and white still. So this is an example of somebody who did a good job, but was not supposed to be using grayscale. So I don't want you to look at that and think that that's acceptable. All right, and then again, another pattern, okay, based off of this mark. All right, so you get the idea here. And so after you have done your work, you're going to download this phase 3 documentation template, just in a similar way that you did to the phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. And you're going to put your studies into it, and you're going to turn it into a PDF and upload it here for the assignment in this discussion. And so in the next video, we'll talk about the 4th phase where you start to add color and do color sampling and assignment.